Today I'm going to answer one of the most common questions I receive from clients, which is, can I select my USCIS processing location? Usually this question comes up when a client has looked at the USCIS.gov website and realized that there can be, some amount of variability between how long it takes to process a particular case type in a different service center. And so it's obvious, of course we want our cases to go through as quickly as possible. Can we strategically pick which service center is going to handle our case? So today we're going to talk about the circumstances in which you can sort of have some say in how your case is processed, and the times in which you really can't select your processing location. So you have that clear, and at some level you just have to accept the immigration process for what it is if you're in a situation where you just really have no say over how the case is processed. So first of all, I want to talk a little bit about how cases are filed, just briefly, so that you understand what else I'm going to explain later on in this video. So some cases can be filed electronically, through the USCIS website. The vast majority of cases are still filed by mail. And for cases that are mailed in, there are pages on the USCIS.gov website that show you what the filing addresses are for those case types. So typically they're based on your location at the time of filing. So you look up the state where you're residing, or if you're residing abroad, and based on that, it will tell you, okay, send your application to this lockbox. It's usually a lockbox location that you're mailing to. So a lockbox location is not a place where they're actually making a decision on your case. It's just like what it sounds like, a big post office box where all of your applications are being sent, and where USCIS is receiving and sorting them. And basically from there, they're assigning them to what's called a service center, which will actually do the heavy lifting to make a decision on your case. So, and you won't actually know where exactly it's going from the lockbox until you get the receipt notice back, which lists which service center you've been sent to. So you can send multiple applications to the same lockbox, and they can end up at different service centers. Sometimes as attorneys, we can guess where it's going to go just based on certain ways that certain types of applications are processed, or sometimes there's sort of a pattern, but in general, you have to send it to the lockbox that you're assigned to, and then it's out of your hands where it goes. Also be aware that even though your receipt notice may say a particular service center, sometimes later on in the case, you're actually going to get a transfer notice that lets you know, hey, your case was processing at this particular service center. Now it's being moved to this other one. Why would they do that? They're trying to be efficient. I know sometimes it doesn't feel like that, but sometimes they move the workload around just to make sure that if one service center does sort of get, way behind, they'll start transferring some of the workload to another service center to get them caught up. So you can see some jumping around of the processing locations. So for all of those reasons, if your case is being mailed to a lockbox and it's ending up at a service center, there's really not anything you can do to select your preferred service center. You just kind of have to go with what is, and just pay attention to the details in your case. But I promised you that I would tell you about some situations in which you could potentially have some say over how your case is processed or the processing times. So it's kind of a narrow slice of people that are potentially impacted, but I definitely want to give you all the information. So there are cases that are processed in service centers, as we discussed, and there are also other types of cases that are processed in what's called USCIS field offices. So field offices are what you think of whenever a case is going to be involving an in-person interview. So USCIS has these field offices, which are public-facing offices where they actually see people. So a service center, you can't get in. There's no waiting room or anything like that. But if you're ever called in for, say, a naturalization interview or an adjustment of status interview, those are kind of the most common case types that are handled through the field offices. Then, the cases are routed to these field offices. There are a lot more field offices. Just if you think about the fact that they have to interview the public or interview these applicants all across the United States, there are a lot more field offices than there are service centers, and they're scattered all across the United States. They also vary pretty widely on their processing times. And you can look it up on the USCIS.gov website and see, naturalizations in this place are taking, sometimes it's one place is taking 4 or 5 months, and then another place in the United States is taking over 2 years for the same case type. So why does this matter? if you're living wherever you're living in the United States when you're applying for naturalization or applying for adjustment of status is going to dictate which field office you get assigned to. There are some big metropolitan areas that have several field offices, and you might get assigned to, one of those. But for most places, there's just one field office servicing your area, and you're going to get assigned there. You do have control, however, on over where you live, I hope. And so the one way that I do see this come into play sometimes in the strategy for a client's case is if you're in a situation where maybe you're living in a particular jurisdiction that has a relatively fast processing time for the case type you're going to file or that you've already filed, and you're thinking about, maybe moving somewhere else in the United States, and you can actually look and see, okay, what's the processing time over there? And if it's like very terrible compared to your current processing time and your plans are flexible, sometimes people actually make a decision to say, hey, we know we want to move to this other area, but really let's just wait until this case is complete here at our local office since they're so efficient compared to some of the other offices, and vice versa, where maybe you're living somewhere where it's, taking a very long time to process cases and you're planning to move to somewhere that would be faster. That can help speed it up. One thing to be aware of, however, is that there is some wait time for the new office that you move to take jurisdiction of your case or for you to be able to file. So if you're filing a naturalization case, part of the rule is that the field office making the decision has to have had you living in their jurisdiction for at least 3 months. So you can't just totally cherry pick your jurisdiction, but there can be kind of some strategy in your long-term plans that could impact your processing times. So hopefully this gives you the information you need to know to either make peace with the fact that you have no control over the processing center or the processing location of your application, or if you happen to be in one of those scenarios where where you live makes a difference, then you could kind of carefully make your decisions about moving and in terms of how that'll impact your case.